Help? Charles barked, his voice dripping with scorn. Help with what? A secretarial job. Me, Charles Obidike, a PhD holder with a first class in all my degrees, the managing director of Olive and Shell Oil Company. Over my dead body, will Charles Obidike ever work as a secretary? Never. Amaka turned into the driveway of their modest 3-bedroom bungalow, the kind of house that told a quiet story of simple beginnings and careful sacrifices. The evening sun painted the sky with shades of orange and gold, its warm glow bouncing off the dusty windshield of her car. But Amaka hardly noticed. Her head throbbed like a beating drum, and her arms felt like they would give way under the invincible weight of exhaustion. 12 grueling hours' work at the bank had stolen every ounce of her strength, but she knew all too well that her hardest battle of the day was still waiting for her inside. With a deep breath, she pushed the car door open and stepped into the house. Chaos hit her like a slap. The kitchen sink was overflowing with breakfast dishes, bits of dried scrambled eggs clinging stubbornly to plates and forks. The floor was littered with clothes, a trail of disorder that led straight to the living room, a war zone of carelessness. There, at the center of it all, sat Charles. He was proud on the couch, his eyes glued to the television screen where a football match roared in excitement. On the coffee table sat a half-empty bottle of alcohol, condensation pooling beneath it, while his greasy bowl of jollof rice balanced lazily on his lap. "You're back," Charles muttered, without sparing her a glance. His tone, as casual as if she had just returned from a leisurely stroll rather than a grueling day at work. Amaka felt her chest tighten, the sharp string of tears threatening to spill. She wanted to scream, to crumble, but all she managed was a curt yes and back. As she dropped her bag on the dining table with a thud, Charles leaned back, barely acknowledging her presence. "Good. This jollof rice is too spicy and I couldn't eat it. I feel so hungry right now. Dinner should be ready soon, right?" he said, his voice devoid of care, as though the chaos around him didn't exist and her exhaustion wasn't worth noticing. Amaka could perceive the strong stench of alcohol oozing out of his mouth. She froze, her fists clenching at her sides. She could feel her nails digging into her palms, the slight pain grounding her against the storm of emotions brewing inside. "Charles," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and despair. "I just walked in the door. I'm tired. You've been home all day doing nothing. How long is this going to continue? Could you at least clean up this mess and make yourself dinner?" His response was a laugh, a hollow, mocking sound that sliced through her already fragile heart. It was a kind of laugh that told her he didn't care, that her feelings and exhaustion were nothing but an inconvenience to him. "You're funny, Amaka," he said, finally turning to face her, though his eyes held no kindness. "Cooking and cleaning are your duties as a wife. Remember, I am the man of the house, and you must fulfill your duties as a wife. I've been waiting all day hungry, left with nothing But this useless plate of jollof rice. Don't get me pissed. Oh, and don't forget to iron my shirts for tomorrow. The words hit her like a slap, leaving her stunned. Amaka stood there, staring at the man she had once thought she loved, wondering how it had come to this. Her chest ached, not from fatigue, but from the weight of disappointment. She wanted to yell, to cry, to pack her bags and walk away from it all. But instead, she stood in silence, her heart breaking a little more with every second that passed. As Amaka climbed the stairs to her room, her heart felt as heavy as a stone sinking in the bottom of deep, dark water. The weight of her thoughts pressed on her chest, making it hard to breathe. How had it come to this? How had her life, once so full of hope and laughter, turned into this endless spiral of exhaustion and heartache? She paused at the top of the stairs, leaning against the railing as her mind drifted back to the day she first met Charles. It had been on one of those rainy Lagos afternoons, when the skies opened up without warning and left everyone scrambling for cover. Amaka was returning from a job interview, her shoes soaked and her dress splattered with mud from the untarred road. She felt miserably ashamed by the way she looked, tattered and unkempt. Nothing like the professional image she had wanted to present. As she trudged down the downpour, head bowed against the rain, a sleek car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, and a handsome young man leaned out, his face warm with concern. "Excuse me, miss," he called, his voice cutting through the sound of the rain. "Please, let me give you a lift." Amaka hesitated, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. He seemed kind, but this was Lagos, and he was a stranger. "Thank you, but I'll soon get a bus," she replied quickly, trying to sound polite while keeping her guard up. But the man wasn't ready to take no for an answer. "I won't let a beautiful lady like you walk under this rain," he said, with a playful smile that lit up his face. "Oh, do you think I'm a killer?" His seasoned smirk caught her off guard, and she couldn't help but laugh. Even so, she shook her head firmly. "Thanks, but no thanks," she said again, but this time with a small smile. "I don't accept rights from strangers. This is Lagos, for crying out loud, and anyone could be anything, even if they don't seem like it. I will walk home if I have to." What happened next left her shocked. "I love stubborn girls like you," he said, laughing softly. "But I can't let you walk alone in this weather." Without another word, he pulled over, parked his car by the side of the road, and stepped out into the pouring rain. Amaka stared at him, wide-eyed. "What are you doing?" she asked, a mix of disbelief and amusement in her voice. "I'm walking with you," he said simply, his smile undeterred by the rain soaking through his clothes. "You can decide if we both die on this road, or if you will let me give you a ride." For a moment, she could only gape at him. Then, to her surprise, she burst into laughter. His determination and humor were so unexpected that she couldn't help but be charmed. They walked together for a few minutes, the rain pouring down around them, before she stopped and turned to him. "Are you seriously doing this?" she asked, still laughing. "Yes," he replied, his voice soft and sincere. "For you." Something inside her softened at those words. She had never met anyone like him before. Someone so persistent, so kind, and so willing to look foolish just to prove a point. Her defenses crumbled, and she smiled at him. "You've won," she said softly. "I won't let us both die under this rain." They laughed together, a deep, heartwarming laughter that felt like a burst of sunlight in the storm. And just like that, she agreed to get to the car. As they drove off, the awkwardness melted into easy conversation, and by the end of the ride, Amaka realized she had met someone truly special. That rainy day marked the beginning of their friendship, one that quickly blossomed into something more. Charles became her Prince Charming, the man she had dreamed of. He was everything she thought she wanted: handsome, ambitious, and full of sweet words that made her heart flutter. He showered her with compliments, telling her she was the sweetest woman he had ever met and how much he adored her. He spoiled her with expensive gifts, designer bags, perfumes, and jewelry, and whisked her off on fun outings every weekend. Amaka felt like the luckiest woman alive, swept up in a whirlwind romance that seemed too good to be true. In no time, they were talking about marriage, and she was sure she had found her forever. Charles had promised her the world, and she believed him with all her heart. Fast forward to today. She couldn't recognize the man she had fallen in love with. He had totally changed. His charm dulled like a fading star, replaced by a sense of entitlement, so thick that it suffocated her. His words, once sweet and tender, full of promises, had turned sharp and dismissive. And when he lost his job 6 months ago, his laziness grew like weeds in a neglected garden, choking out the remnants of the man she once knew. Amaka bit her lip, trying to keep her emotions in check. As she walked into her room, took off her clothes, and slowly made her way to the kitchen, she caught sight of her reflection in the shiny surface of the microwave, and her breath caught in her throat. The woman staring back at her was a stranger. Tired eyes, sagging shoulders, and a face that seemed to have aged beyond its years. Where was the vibrant, confident woman she used to be? She tried to blink back the tears that were spilling, but it rolled off uncontrollably, her voice barely above a whisper. "This can't be my life," she muttered, the words trembling as they left her lips. The cracks in their marriage hadn't been so visible at first. How could she have believed that a man so attentive, ambitious, and generous could turn out this way? She had ignored the little warning signs, brushing them off as quicks. But now, those small red flags she had once dismissed loomed large in her memory, glaring reminders of her oversight. She remembered their second date in a fancy restaurant. He had ordered only water for himself while she ate. Worried, she had asked him why he wasn't eating, and he simply replied, "I can't eat outside food. Only homemade meals work for me." It sounded like a joke, his tone light and playful, and she laughed it off, thinking it was a harmless comment, a preference like any other. She hadn't realized it was a glimpse of the future, a future where cooking every meal would fall solely on her shoulders, no matter how tired or overwhelmed she felt. She thought his ambitions would lift them both higher. But now, all she could see were the burdens he left for her to carry alone. The memories cut through her like shards of glass, each one a reminder of the slow unraveling of her marriage. How had she not seen this coming? The real trouble began when Charles lost his job. At first, Amaka had thrown her whole heart into being supportive, determined to stand by her husband through this difficult time. "We'll get through this together," she told him one evening, holding his hands and looking into his eyes with unwavering belief. She thought her encouragement would light a fire in him, that he would pick himself up and try again. But days turned into weeks, and weeks stretched into months. Instead of making plans or taking small steps forward, Charles became a shadow of himself, angry, bitter, and too proud to consider any job he deemed beneath him. One evening, Amaka came home feeling a rare spark of joy. She had good news she believed would lift Charles's spirit and perhaps bring a little light back into their strained lives. A friend had told her about a secretarial position at her uncle's company, a reputable firm known for offering employees opportunities for growth. Her friend had even promised to speak to her uncle personally to help Charles get the job. As Amaka walked into the house, her heart raced with excitement. She couldn't wait to share the possibility of hope with her husband. "Charles," she began, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "Guess what? There's a job opening, a secretarial position at a big company. It's my friend's uncle firm, and she said she can talk to him about it for you. It could be a fresh start. For you, for us. What do you think?" Her eyes sparkled with hope, but the moment she looked at Charles, her joy drained away. His face twisted in anger, and before she could say another word, he stood up and thundered, "This will be the first and last time you go out there, screaming to every tiny bird that I'm jobless." His voice was loud, sharp, and cutting, like a slap to her face. Amaka froze, her heart sinking like a stone. She stared at him, unable to hide the disappointment and fear etched on her face. But I was only trying to help," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Help?" Charles backed, his voice dripping with scorn. "Help with what? A secretarial job? Me, Charles Obidike, a PhD holder with a first class in all my degrees, the managing director of Olive and Shell Oil Company." He spat out each word as if they were poison, his chest heaving with indignation. Amaka clenched her fist, her own frustration boiling to the surface. "That was before Charles," she snapped, cutting him off. "This is our reality now. It's been 6 months since you lost your job. 6 months, Charles." Her voice rose, her irritation spilling out like a dam breaking. Charles's face darkened, his pride refusing to let her words sink in. "What I won't let you do is stand there and insult me," he roared. "Over my dead body, will Charles Obidike ever work as a secretary? Never." Amaka took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "But it's a big company," she said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "You could start there and work your way up. There's always a chance for something better." But Charles didn't let her finish. He grabbed his shirt, his movements jerky and angry, and stormed out of the house, cursing under his breath. The door slammed behind him, the sound echoing through the silent room like a gunshot. Amaka sank onto the couch, her head resting in her hands. She stared blankly at the wall, her mind racing but unable to focus on anything. How long were they going to live like this? How long would Charles let his pride hold them both hostage? The worst part wasn't even his rejection of the job. It was that he wasn't making any effort at all. Day after day, he sat at home, glued to the television, watching football, eating and drinking as though life owed him something. Each passing day chipped away at her patience, leaving her feeling more frustrated and helpless. After that evening, more little opportunities had come up, jobs that could have brought some relief to their growing financial strain. But Charles had turned down each one, his disdain painted clearly on his face. "You expect me to take that condescending job?" he would scoff, his voice dripping with mockery. "Wait, what do you even take me for? Do you think I'm some common laborer, Amaka? Have you forgotten who I am?" His words stung, each one hitting her like a brick wall she couldn't climb. He didn't seem to realize or care that the man he once was no longer existed. Instead of working to rebuild their lives, Charles clung to his pride, leaving Amaka to carry the weight of his failures and their future alone. Amaka kept quiet and bore the financial weight on her own, stretching her tiny salary to cover their rent, bills, groceries, and every other expense. She bore the burden not just of their survival, but also of Charles' soaring ego. Yet, his refusal to contribute didn't stop at money. He wouldn't even lift a finger to help at home either. One evening, as Amaka stood hunched over the sink, scrubbing at the last of their laundry, because the washing machine had broken weeks ago, her frustration boiled over. "Why do we even have this washing machine, if I still have to do all the laundry by hand?" she asked, her voice breaking under the weight of exhaustion and resentment. Charles didn't even look up from his phone. "Don't make it sound like it's such a big deal," he replied casually, as if her suffering was invincible. "Women have been doing these things for centuries. It's natural." That response broke something inside her. But Amaka, ever the peacekeeper, swallowed her hurt and pushed on. For months, she survived on sheer willpower, balancing her demanding job at the bank with the relentless demands of her home. Her days blurred into one endless loop of work, cooking, cleaning, and pleading silently for Charles to see her pain. Her body, however, could only take so much. One Friday morning, the exhaustion caught up with her. Running on just 3 hours of sleep and feeling like she was drowning in a fog, Amaka suddenly collapsed at her desk. Her head spun and darkness crept in around the edges of her vision. "Amaka, are you okay?" Ifeanyi, her colleague, was at her side in an instant, catching her just before she hit the floor. His concerned voice echoed dimly in her ears, but she couldn't answer. Hours later, as she lay in a hospital bed, the doctor's stern words shook her to the core. "You are overworked. Your body is warning you. If you don't start taking care of yourself, you are going to shut down completely." Her mother came to visit that evening at the hospital, her face lined with worry, her eyes glistened with unshed tears. She couldn't recognize her own daughter anymore. She sat by Amaka's bedside, holding her hand tightly, as Amaka shared all what she had been passing through. "Why did you keep quiet and suffer alone? You should have told me about this," her mother said, Tears were rolling down her cheeks. I didn't want to get anyone worried, Amaka replied. Amaka, she called softly but firmly. You need to leave that man. He's killing you slowly and he's not worth dying for. No man is. You are my child, and I can't stand by and watch you waste away like this. Amaka didn't respond, but her mother's words clung to her like a shadow. That night, as she lay beside Charles in their bed, she listened to his peaceful snores. He slept soundly, without a care in the world, while her mind raced with thoughts of all she had endured. Something inside her shifted, something deep and immovable. She realized she couldn't keep living this way. Enough was enough. For the first time in years, she began to think of herself, of her happiness, and what her life could look like if she let go of the man who was slowly breaking her spirit. The confrontation happened over breakfast the next morning, a meal that carried more tension than the silent walls around them. Amaka placed Charles's plate of toast and eggs on the table with deliberate care, her hands steady despite the storm raging inside her. She took her seat across from him, her heart pounding as if it might leap out of her chest. We need to talk, Amaka said, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. The weight of those words felt familiar to her, yet there was no turning back now. She had held in her frustrations for far too long. Charles didn't look up his plate. He calmly sliced through his toast, his movements slow and deliberate, as though her words didn't matter. About what he mumbled, barely paying attention, his focus still on his breakfast. Amaka gripped the edge of the table so tightly, her knuckles turned white. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to press on. This arrangement isn't working, Charles. I can't keep doing everything by myself. Working all day and still coming home to endless chores. It's too much. If you won't help me around the house, at least let's get a maid. Her words hung in the air for a moment, sharp and unrelenting. They hit Charles like a slap, and he froze mid-bite. Slowly, he set his fork down and looked up at her. His gaze was cold, calculating, his eyes narrowing like a predator sizing up its prey. You already know my take on that, he said, his voice low and dangerous, slicing through the air like a blade. You will not bring a stranger into my house. And why not? Amaka shot back, her voice trembling but growing firmer with each word. You don't contribute financially, Charles. You don't lift a finger to help with the housework. What do you expect me to do? Work myself into an early grave just to keep this house running? Her words cut through the silence like a knife, the truth in them impossible to ignore. For a moment, Charles didn't respond. His face hardened, his jaw tightening, and then his voice exploded with indignation. Oh, so this is it. Finally, your true colors are out, he shouted, his voice rising like a storm. He stood abruptly, slamming his hand on the table. What's holding you back? Take a mic. Go outside and shout. Tell the world you are feeding me. Tell the whole world that you are the provider of this house. Go on, Amaka. What are you waiting for? Tell them. Tell them everything. His words dripped with venom, his anger blazing like wildfire. Amaka stared at him, her eyes wide with shock. This wasn't the man she had married. This was someone else entirely. "You know that's not what I meant," she said, her voice trembling with disbelief and hurt. "You know I've been doing my best to hold us together." "Then do it in peace," Charles bellowed, his face twisted with rage. "And don't you dare disrespect me, Amaka. I am the head of this household. If you can't handle your responsibilities as a wife, then maybe you're not cut out for marriage." His words hit her like a punch to the gut, knocking the air out of her lungs. She stood, frozen, tears spilling down her eyes. Her heart pounded as though it might burst. For a moment, she didn't know what to say, didn't know how to respond to the man standing in front of her. A man who was supposed to love and support her, but instead tore her down with his pride and anger. She felt something inside her snap. Slowly, deliberately, she pushed back her chair, the sharp scrape of wood against the tiled floor filling the tense silence. She stood tall, her body trembling with a mix of anger and resolve. "You are right, Charles," she said, her voice steady even as her hand shook. "Maybe I'm not cut out for marriage. But I tell you one thing." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze piercing through his smug expression. "I am not your maid. I am done." The room fell silent, the kind of silence that spoke louder than any argument. Charles stared at her, stunned, as if he hadn't expected her to stand up to him. But Amaka didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked out of the room, her heart pounding, her steps steady. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of freedom, a silver hope that maybe, just maybe, she was finally choosing herself. Amaka grabbed her car keys with trembling hands and walked out of the house, her back stiff and her steps purposeful. Chelsea's angry shout echoed behind her. "If you step out of this house, do not ever come back." But she didn't look back. She couldn't. If she hesitated even for a second, she might lose the courage that was propelling her forward. The weight of her decision hung heavy on her shoulders, but for the first time in years, she felt a spark of freedom. She didn't go too far. Just to her friend Kemi's house, where she knew she would be welcomed without judgment. But she didn't tell Charles that. Kemi's eyes was filled with tears when she saw her friend. She welcomed her in with a warm hug. "All will be well, my friend," she said to Amaka. "I've told you to leave that man, but you have refused to listen to me." Amaka simply sobbed into her friend's shoulder without uttering a word. At first, Charles brushed it off. He was confident that his wife loved him too much and she would soon come crawling back. "She's just being dramatic," he muttered to himself, lounging on the couch and flipping through channels. But by the second day, reality began to set in. His favorite TV snacks were gone. His pile of dirty clothes was growing and the house was eerily quiet without Amaka bustling around. He tried calling and texting her countless times, but she didn't pick up. She let her phone buzz and ding with his calls and text messages, ignoring each one. She wasn't ready to talk, and she certainly wasn't ready to come home. She wanted Charles to feel the emptiness and pain she had been carrying alone for so long. Hungry, he decided to cook some rice, but his attempt ended in disaster. Burned rice sticking to the pot like a bitter reminder of his helplessness. Frustrated, he called a friend to vent, hoping for some sympathy. Instead, his friend laughed out loudly. Charles, are you serious? You can't even cook simple rice. I've always told you about how you treated your wife. That woman has been a huge support for over a year now, and you took her for granted. Now, this is your cross. Just leave me out of your family drama. He hissed and hung up. The words stung more than he cared to admit, and for the first time, he felt a pang of something unfamiliar. Guilt. By the third day, the house was a complete mess. The dirty dishes in the sink had attracted an army of ants. The trash in the bin reeked of decay, and the floors were sticky with spilled beer. Charles, unshaven and disheveled, sat slumped on the couch. He hadn't even showered since his wife left because he couldn't find a clean towel. The entire house was smelling. The loneliness and chaos were overwhelming. And for the first time, he began to realize just how much he had relied on Amaka and how much help she had been. After 5 long days, Charles could no longer bear it. The silence from Amaka was eating away at him. She wasn't speaking his calls, nor was she trying to even reply to his countless messages. The house felt like a tomb, cold and empty, with the echoes of his own thoughts haunting him. He sat on the couch staring at his phone, wishing it would ring and the caller would be Amaka. But it never happened. Desperation gnawed at him, and he convinced himself she must have gone to her parents' house. She has to be there, he thought. Where else would she go? Dragging himself out of the house, he cleaned up as best as he could and drove to Amaka's family home. His heart pounded as he parked outside, rehearsing what he would say. But the moment the door opened and he saw Mrs. Orji's face, his courage faltered. She stood tall and firm, her face darkened with anger as she blocked the doorway. "Are you here to tell me you've killed my daughter?" she asked, her voice sharp and stern, cutting through the silence. "Killed?" Charles stammered, his hands shaking slightly. No, ma. I don't kill." "Then why are you here?" she asked, her eyes narrowing at him. He swallowed hard. "Ma, I'm here to take back my wife. She left home 5 days ago and hasn't been answering my calls." Mrs. Orji burst into laughter, her voice echoing through the compound. When her laughter subsided, her expression hardened, and she looked him straight in the eye. "You mean you're here to take back your maid? Is that it? Because that's what you treated her like." She shook her head, her disappointment evident. "My daughter has been a good wife to you, Charles. You are a disgrace to manhood. A disgrace. Unfortunately for you, she's not here. And frankly, I'm glad she finally got some sense and left for her own good. Now, leave my house before I unleash my anger on you." Charles blinked, stunned. This was the same woman who had once adored him, who had praised him endlessly during their courtship. I didn't get you, ma," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, are you still standing there?" she shouted, her anger flaring. "All right then, wait for me." She disappeared into the house and returned moments later with a long stick in her hand. Chelsea's eyes widened in fear, and without waiting for her to get closer, he turned and bolted, sprinting to his car. He fumbled with the keys, his hands trembling as he started the engine and sped out of the compound. "Anuafia!" Mrs. Oji shouted after him, the insult echoing in his ears as he drove away. When Charles got home, he collapsed onto the floor, his head in his hands. He sat there, unmoving, consumed by the weight of his own guilt. He had thought Amaka's absence would be temporary, that she would come back on her own. But now, with even her mother rejecting him, he realized how deep his mistakes had been. Everyone was blaming him, and the worst part was, he didn't even know how to find Amaka to make things right. By the next day, the silence and the mess around him became unbearable. He forced himself to get up and started cleaning the house. For the first time since he got married, he swept, scrubbed and tidied up the rooms. His hands, unused to such work, blistered and ached, but he didn't stop. If nothing else, he wanted Amaka to see he was trying, even if she wasn't there to witness it. Weeks passed, and still there was no sign of Amaka. The house was spotless, but Chelsea's life was crumbling. He had no money left, not even a single grain of rice in the house. The emptiness in the store mirrored the emptiness in his stomach. In his desperation, he called a friend to borrow him money, but the response stung more than he could have imagined. "Charles, I'm not giving you a dime," his friend said bluntly. "You need to get a job. At least, then you will have a way to pay me back. And frankly, it's a good thing your wife left you. Maybe you can now think clearly on an empty stomach and get your life back together, Mr. First Class." The mockery burned, but the hunger burned even more. Days of going without food broke Charles's pride, piece by piece. One morning, as his stomach growled in protest, he got up, pulled out his dusty CV and began looking for work. This time, he wasn't picky. He didn't care if it was a secretary, a cleaner, or a cashier. He just needed to earn something to survive. He roamed the streets of Lagos, knocking on doors, handing out his CV, and swallowing the last remnants of his pride. As he walked under the sun, drenched in sweat and weak with hunger, Charles finally understood the weight Amaka had carried alone for so long. He had dismissed her struggles, ignoring her pleas, and now he was living the reality she had endured for years. Weeks turned into months, and Charles was slowly becoming a better man, not just for Amaka, but for himself. He had learned to let go of his pride and take responsibility for his life. Still, not a day passed without him trying to reach out to his wife. He sent messages, left voicemails, begging her to come back. In every word, he poured out his regrets and the lessons he had learned in her absence. He promised to be the man she deserved, to be her partner and not her burden. One evening, as Charles sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone, a notification popped up, a reply from Amaka. His heart raced as he opened the message. She had agreed to meet him at a restaurant. For the first time in months, Charles felt a glimmer of hope. He was so overjoyed that he jumped up, screaming, "Yes, yes," as if he had won a lottery. The day of their meeting couldn't come fast enough. When Amaka finally walked into the restaurant, Charles froze. Tears welled up in his eyes as he saw her. She looked radiant, more relaxed, refreshed and beautiful than he had remembered. Her absence had done her good, but it also hit him like a punch to the gut. How could I have put her through so much pain? He thought. Without thinking, Charles fell to his knees in the middle of the restaurant. His voice cracked with emotion as he said, "Amaka, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I've been such a fool. Please, come back home." Amaka's eyes widened in surprise as she looked around at the curious stares of the other diners. "Charles, please stop this," she whispered urgently. "I'm not angry at you anymore. Just stand up." But Charles shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "Not until you agree to come home." "You're embarrassing yourself," she said softly, her voice tinged with both exasperation and amusement. "Embarrassing, you say?" Charles asked, getting to his feet. He clapped his hands together and shouted, "Everyone, please help me tell my wife to come home. Tell her I'm sorry and I love her." All eyes turned to their table. A few diners began to plead on Charles's behalf. "Go back to him, please," one said. "Forgive him. He looks truly sorry," another added. Amaka shook her head, unable to hide a small smile that crept onto her lips. "You really have no shame, Charles," she said with a soft laugh. "I agree," Charles said, his eyes lighting up at the sight of her smile. "I have no shame. Not at all. I will do whatever it takes to prove to you that I love you and that I am a changed man." As they sat down to eat, Amaka raised an eyebrow when Charles ordered food from the menu. "What? Are you sure this is Charles?" she teased. "What happened to your only homemade meals rule?" Charles scratched the back of his head awkwardly. I tried cooking," he admitted, "and almost burned the house down. But I'm learning. It's not as easy I thought." Amaka laughed softly, unable to hide her surprise. "So, tell me, how have you been coping?" she asked curiously. "I got a job," he said simply. Her eyes widened. "As a managing director?" Charles hesitated, then shook his head. "No, as a gardener." Amaka burst into laughter, clapping her hands in disbelief. "You, a PhD holder, with first-class degrees, a gardener? Do you even remember who you are?" Charles looked at her, his eyes filled with sincerity. "I do, Amaka. I remember, and I realize how foolish I was. I let pride get the best of me. Your absence and the hunger I felt taught me the hard lessons I needed to learn. I can even clean now, and I see how much work you've been doing all these years. Please, come home. I promise to appreciate you and make you happy every day. I will help you, I will support you, and you can even get a maid if you want one." Amaka didn't respond immediately, but her heart softened at his words. She couldn't deny the love she still felt for him. Weeks later, when Amaka finally returned home, she was greeted by the sight of Charles in the kitchen, apron on, stirring a pot of soup. The entire house sparkled with cleanliness. He looked up as she walked in, his face lighting up with relief. "You are back," he said softly, almost as if he didn't believe it. "I am," she replied, smiling at him. Charles couldn't hold back his emotions. He swept her into a warm, tight hug. "I'm so sorry for everything," he whispered into her ear. In the weeks that followed, Amaka saw the proof of his transformation. He no longer littered the house or sat idly in front of the TV. He was supportive, thoughtful, and eager to help. He cooked dinner when he got home from work, made sure the house was always clean, and even left little notes around the house to make her smile. She also saw his determination to find a better job. Every evening, Charles sat at the table sending out his CV and applying for positions, hoping to rebuild the life they once dreamed of together. Their love, once strained and fractured, began to heal. They laughed more, shared their dreams, and filled their home with the warmth and sweetness of true love. Amaka was happy again. She had gotten back the child she fell in love with, but this time it was better. His pride had been replaced with humility, and his love had grown deeper. Her absence had taught him a lesson he would never forget. And together, they rebuilt their lives with love, respect, and gratitude. Hey besties, we've come to the end of this amazing story, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed making it. I would love you to share your lessons in the comments section. And if you are yet to subscribe to this channel and you enjoy our stories, please do not skip this video without hitting the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so that you get notified whenever we post new stories. Right now, I have to go and see you in our next story. Thank you for all your love and support. I appreciate them all. Bye.